Vanessa, we need this table for actual family. There's a smaller one in the corner. Why don't you sit there? My mother's voice cut through the low hum of champagne glasses and polite laughter. She didn't whisper it. She said it loud enough for the couple beside us to hear, loud enough for the waiter refilling water glasses to pause mid-pour. I stood there holding my clutch purse, wearing the navy dress I'd spent 2 hours selecting, and felt my face go hot. The engagement party was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids on every table, a string quartet playing something soft and expensive in the corner. My younger brother Marcus stood near the bar with his fiancée Amber, both of them glowing under the attention of relatives I hadn't seen in years. This was his night. I knew that. I'd driven 4 hours from Chicago to be here. I'd brought a gift, an expensive one, wrapped in cream paper with a silk ribbon. I'd done everything right, but my mother was pointing toward a small table near the kitchen doors, half hidden behind a decorative screen. "Mom, I thought it's just easier this way," she said, not looking at me. She was adjusting a centerpiece, her mouth set in that tight line I knew too well. "We have Amber's family at this table. You understand." I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway, because that's what I'd been doing my entire life. I'm Vanessa Williams. I'm 34 years old. I work as a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm in Chicago, and I've spent 3 decades trying to earn a place at tables I was never supposed to sit at. Tonight was supposed to be different. I thought maybe, just this once, I'd be included without having to ask. I thought wrong. I walked to the corner table, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice brighten as she greeted Amber's parents, warm and effusive in a way I'd never heard directed at me. I set my purse down and sat in the chair facing the wall. From here, I could see the party, but I wasn't part of it. I was a witness, a guest in my own family's celebration. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, stay with me, because this story doesn't end in silence. It ends in something they'll never forget. Marcus was 29, 5 years younger than me, and he'd always been the sun around which our family orbited. When he was in high school, my parents paid for SAT tutors, college application coaches, and a summer program at Stanford that cost more than my first car. When he graduated with a business degree, they gave him a down payment on a condo in a trendy neighborhood. When he started his first company, which failed within 18 months, they called it a learning experience and funded his next venture without hesitation. I paid my own way through state school. I worked 2 jobs to cover rent. I moved to Chicago for work and bought my own furniture, my own car, my own life. My parents visited once in 6 years. They called on my birthday if they remembered. When I got promoted to senior analyst, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and changed the subject to Marcus's new business idea. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was independent, self-sufficient, better off without their constant involvement. But the truth was simpler and more painful. They just didn't think about me unless they had to. From my corner table, I watched my father stand to give a toast. Robert Williams was a tall man with silver hair and a voice that commanded rooms. He raised his glass and smiled at Marcus with a pride so naked it made my chest ache. "To my son," he began, and the room quieted. "Marcus has always had a gift for bringing people together. He's brilliant, he's driven, and he's found a partner who matches his ambition and his heart. Amber, we couldn't be happier to welcome you into this family. To Marcus and Amber, may your future be as bright as you both are." The room erupted in applause. I lifted my glass with everyone else, my smile fixed in place. My father didn't look at me once during the entire speech. Not once. It wasn't cruelty. It was indifference, which somehow felt worse. A distant cousin I barely recognized approached my table, her face confused. "Vanessa, why are you sitting all the way over here?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared beside her, touching her elbow gently. "Oh, Vanessa just prefers a quieter spot," she said smoothly, steering the cousin away. "You know how she is." I watched them walk toward the main tables together, the cousin nodding as my mother whispered something I couldn't hear. Whatever she said worked. The cousin didn't look back. I sat alone for the next hour, watching my family laugh and toast and take photos. I wasn't in any of them. No one asked me to join. No one seemed to notice I was missing. I realized, slowly and with a clarity that felt like cold water, that I'd been erased from the family narrative entirely. I wasn't the black sheep. I wasn't the disappointment. I was simply not there. Maybe it's time I stop pretending this hurts less than it does. The cocktail hour stretched into dinner service. I stayed at my corner table, half hidden behind the decorative screen, and watched the party unfold like a film I wasn't cast in. Waiters moved efficiently between tables, delivering plates of seared scallops and filet mignon. Laughter rose and fell in waves. My mother moved through the crowd with practiced grace, touching shoulders, leaning in for photographs, her smile wide and genuine. I'd never seen her look at me that way. Marcus stood near the bar with Amber, his arm around her waist, accepting congratulations from a steady stream of relatives and friends. He looked happy. He looked like someone who'd never doubted for a moment that he deserved every bit of attention he was receiving. Maybe he was right. Maybe some people were just born knowing they belonged, and others spent their whole lives trying to prove it. A waiter approached my table with a sympathetic expression and set down a plate I hadn't ordered. "Compliments of the chef," he said quietly, though I suspected it was more likely pity from someone who'd noticed I was sitting alone. "Thank you," I said, and he nodded before disappearing back toward the kitchen. I ate slowly, mechanically, tasting nothing. Across the room, my father was deep in conversation with Amber's father, both men laughing over glasses of bourbon. They looked like old friends, though they'd only met twice before tonight. My father had that gift, the ability to make people feel important, seen, valued. He just never used it on me. I thought about leaving. I could slip out through the side door, drive back to Chicago tonight instead of tomorrow morning, and no one would notice until the gift table was being cleared, and someone found my cream-wrapped box with Marcus's name on it. But leaving felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit, so I stayed. Marcus finally approached my table, though not to check on me. He stood at the edge, not sitting, his expression distracted. "Hey, did you remember to RSVP on time?" he essayed. Mom was stressed about the head count. I stared at him. "I RSVP'd 6 weeks ago." "Okay, good." She was worried. He glanced back toward Amber, who was waving him over. "I should get back. Thanks for coming." He walked away before I could respond. Thanks for coming. Like I was a coworker who'd shown up to an optional office party. Not his sister who'd driven 4 hours and bought a gift that cost more than I wanted to admit. I looked down at my plate and realized I'd stopped eating halfway through. My appetite was gone. My presence here was decorative at best, obligatory at worst. I was the box you checked so you could say everyone was invited, everyone came, everything was perfect. Across the room, my mother was laughing with Amber's mother, her face animated in a way I'd only seen in old photographs from before I was born. She looked younger when she smiled like that. Lighter. I wondered if I'd ever made her feel that way, and knew immediately that I hadn't. I'd been the serious child, the quiet one, the one who asked for too little and somehow still managed to be too much. I thought about all the times I tried to connect with her, the phone calls that went unreturned, the invitations to visit Chicago that were met with vague promises and schedule conflicts, the accomplishments I'd shared that were acknowledged with polite disinterest. I'd spent years telling myself she was just busy, just distracted, just not good at emotional expression. But watching her now, warm and present with strangers, I understood the truth. She was capable of connection. She just didn't want it with me. A waiter refilled my water glass. I thanked him quietly. He was the third person to acknowledge me all evening, after the sympathetic server and a confused coat check attendant who'd asked if I was lost. I've been competing for a position that was never available. The thought arrived fully formed, undeniable. I wasn't losing some long-running competition with Marcus for our parents' love. There was no competition. The position had been filled before I was old enough to apply. I was the understudy who'd never be called to the stage, the backup plan that would never be needed, the insurance policy filed away and forgotten. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane, my closest friend back in Chicago. "How's the party?" I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on exactly what I expected. She sent back a heart emoji and, "Call me when you're back. Whine on me." I pocketed my phone and looked around the room one more time. The party was winding down. Some guests were gathering coats. Others lingered over coffee and dessert. My parents were still at the head table, holding court, their faces flushed with wine and satisfaction. Marcus and Amber were cutting a small engagement cake, posing for photos, feeding each other bites while everyone applauded. I'd been here for 3 hours. No one had asked me to join a conversation. No one had introduced me to Amber's family. No one had included me in a single photograph. I was present, but I wasn't participating. I was a name on a guest list. Nothing more. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt something close to relief. Clarity, maybe. The kind that comes when you stop fighting against a truth you've known all along. Dinner concluded with a final round of toasts and applause. Guests began gathering their things, saying goodbyes, promising to see each other at the wedding in 6 months. I stayed in my corner, waiting for the right moment to slip out unnoticed. I'd congratulate Marcus briefly, thank my parents for hosting, and drive back to my hotel. Tomorrow, I'd head home to Chicago and try to forget how small I'd felt tonight. But then the venue coordinator appeared at my table, holding a leather bill folder and wearing an apologetic smile. "Ms. Williams," she said, her voice professionally pleasant. "Your mother asked me to bring this to you." I looked at the folder confused. "I'm sorry, what is this?" "The final balance for the event," she said, setting it down in front of me. "Your mother indicated you'd be taking care of it." My hands went cold. I opened the folder slowly, my heart pounding in a way that felt disconnected from my body. The invoice was itemized: venue rental, catering, floral arrangements, bar service, valet parking. At the bottom, in bold print, 12,100, 12,100. I stared at the number until it stopped making sense. $12,400. For an engagement party I'd been seated at the back of, excluded from, treated like an afterthought at. I looked up at the coordinator, who was still smiling politely, waiting. "There's been a mistake," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I didn't arrange this event." "Oh, I understand," she said, nodding. "But your mother specifically requested that the bill be given to you. She said you'd be handling the payment." I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. Across the room, my mother was laughing with a group of guests, champagne flute in hand. She didn't look in my direction. She knew exactly what she'd done. I walked toward my parents' table, the bill folder clutched in my hand. Several guests noticed my approach, their conversations pausing mid-sentence. My father looked up, his expression shifting from pleasant to guarded. "Vanessa," he said, his tone already dismissive, "we're saying goodbye to the Harrisons." "Mom," I interrupted, looking directly at my mother. "The coordinator just gave me the bill for tonight. $12,000. Is this a mistake?" My mother set down her champagne glass and met my eyes with a calm I recognized immediately. It was the look she gave when she'd already decided something and wasn't interested in discussion. "You're the one with the fancy corporate job, aren't you?" she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby guests. "Marcus is just starting out. We thought you'd want to contribute." The word contribute hung in the air like a slap. Contribute. As if I'd been consulted, as if I'd offered, as if this was a family decision we'd all made together instead of an ambush disguised as an expectation. "You thought I'd want to pay for an event I wasn't included in?" I said quietly. My father leaned forward, his voice low and irritated. "It's not like we're asking for charity, Vanessa. Family helps family." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Family helps family. I'd never been helped, not once. Not with college tuition or moving expenses or anything else. I'd been on my own since I was 18, and they'd called it character building. But now, suddenly, I was family enough to be financially useful. Amber's mother was watching from across the table, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus stood a few feet away, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. No one was going to intervene. No one was going to question this. They were all waiting to see if I'd comply. I looked down at the bill again. $12,400. I thought about my savings account, the vacation I'd been planning, the financial cushion I'd built through years of careful budgeting and sacrifice. I thought about every gift I'd bought for Marcus, every loan I'd given him that was never repaid, every family event I'd traveled to at my own expense while being treated like an inconvenience. And then I thought about what would happen if I said no. The accusations, the guilt trips, the family narrative that would paint me as selfish, bitter, ungrateful, the whisper campaign that would follow me for years. I pulled out my credit card. "Of course," I said, my voice flat. "I'll take care of it." My mother's face relaxed into satisfaction. My father nodded, as if I'd done exactly what was expected. Marcus looked relieved. The coordinator took my card with a professional smile and disappeared toward the front desk. I stood there while she processed the payment, watching my family return to their conversations as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just handed me a $12,000 bill without warning, without asking, without even a thank you. The transaction was accepted as natural, expected. My role, finally clarified. I was the person who paid for things. The coordinator returned with the receipt. I signed it mechanically, my handwriting shaky. She thanked me and walked away. I looked at my mother one more time, waiting for something. Acknowledgement, gratitude, even eye contact. She was already talking to someone else. I walked out of the venue without saying goodbye to anyone. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing in the high-ceilinged space. Behind me, the party continued. Laughter, music, the sound of people who belonged. I got into my car and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath coming in short, controlled bursts. Something inside me had shifted. Not broken, clarified. I'd spent 34 years trying to earn a place in this family, trying to prove I was worth loving, worth including, worth remembering. And tonight, I'd been handed a bill that told me exactly what I was worth to them. $12,400. A transaction, a resource, a solution to their financial planning. I started the engine and drove toward my hotel in complete silence. No music, no tears, just a cold, clarifying decision forming in the back of my mind. Sharp and undeniable. I was done. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my hotel room with my laptop open, the curtains drawn against the city lights, and did what I did best. I analyzed data. I opened a spreadsheet and started listing every dollar I'd spent on my family over the past 10 years. Every birthday gift for Marcus, every Christmas present for my parents, every plane ticket home for Thanksgiving, every contribution to family dinners, every temporary loan to Marcus that was never mentioned again. I included tonight's $12,000 engagement party. I included the weekend I'd flown home to help my parents move and paid for the rental truck myself. I included the graduation gift I'd given Marcus when he finished business school, a $1,500 check he'd cashed without a thank you card. The spreadsheet grew longer. The numbers climbed higher. By 3 in the morning, I was staring at a total that made my stomach turn. $47,000. I'd spent $47,000 over 10 years trying to prove I belonged in a family that had never once asked if I needed anything in return. Not money, not help, not even a phone call to see how I was doing. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark hotel room, listening to the hum of the air, conditioning, and the distant sound of traffic. I felt something I hadn't expected. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that burns out quickly. This was cold and precise. the kind that clarifies instead of clouds. I wasn't angry at myself for trying. I was angry at them for taking. I thought about my mother's face when she told the coordinator to bring me the bill, the casual certainty that I'd pay it, the complete absence of guilt or hesitation. She'd known exactly what she was doing, and she'd done it anyway because she could, because I'd always paid before, because I'd always swallowed my hurt and pretended it didn't matter. But it did matter, and I was done pretending. I opened my laptop again and started a new document, not a spreadsheet this time, a plan. I wasn't going to cut contact impulsively and give them the satisfaction of calling me dramatic or unstable. I wasn't going to send an angry email they could forward to relatives as evidence of my instability. I was going to do something far more effective. I was going to stop performing. No more expensive gifts. No more last-minute financial rescues. No more emotional labor spent trying to bridge a gap they'd never tried to close. I'd remain polite, present when absolutely necessary, and completely unavailable for their exploitation. I'd watch what happened when I stopped being useful. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Marcus, sent at 3:14 in the morning. "Hey, can you Venmo me $600? Amber wants this specific cake tasting and the deposit's due today." No greeting. No acknowledgement of the engagement party or the $12,000 I just paid. Just another request, casual and entitled, as if my bank account existed for his convenience. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder on my phone I titled Evidence. I wasn't sure what I'd need it for yet, but I knew I wanted a record. I wanted to remember this exactly as it happened, so I'd never doubt myself later. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Finally settled on something simple. "I'm a bit stretched after covering last night. Good luck with the tasting." I hit send and turned off my phone. The boundary was small, but it was real. For the first time in my life, I'd said no to my family without apologizing for it. I lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling, waiting for guilt to arrive. It didn't. Instead, I felt something close to relief. The performance was over. The audition I'd been failing for 34 years had finally ended. I didn't get the part, and I was done pretending I still wanted it. Tomorrow, I'd drive back to Chicago. I'd go back to work. I'd live my life. And when my family reached out again, and they would, because they always did when they needed something, I'd be ready. I drove back to Chicago the next morning and spent the following 2 weeks in a strange state of heightened awareness, like I'd been living underwater my whole life and had finally surfaced. Every interaction with my family became clear in a way it never had been before. Marcus never responded to my text about the cake tasting. Instead, 3 days later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, her voice was sharp with irritation. "Vanessa, your brother needed that money today. I don't understand why you're being difficult. He's trying to plan a wedding, and you're making it harder than it needs to be. Call me back." I didn't call back. 2 days after that, my father sent an email with the subject line, "Disappointing behavior." I opened it in my office during lunch, my sandwich untouched beside my keyboard. "Vanessa, your mother and I are concerned about your recent attitude. After everything we've done for you over the years, we expected more support during this important time for your brother. Family is supposed to sacrifice for each other, and your selfishness is unbecoming of the Williams name. We hope you'll reconsider your priorities. Dad." I read it 3 times, looking for any acknowledgement of the $12,000 I just paid, any recognition of the years I'd spent showing up for them while they forgot I existed. There was nothing, just accusations and expectations, wrapped in the language of disappointment. I closed the email without responding and went back to work. That evening, I called Diane. "They're not going to change, Van," she said after I told her everything. We were sitting in her apartment, splitting a bottle of wine, and she was looking at me with the kind of clear-eyed honesty only a real friend can deliver. "The only question is whether you will." The words landed with unexpected weight. I'd spent so long hoping my family would see me differently, treat me differently, love me differently. But Diane was right. They weren't going to change. They'd had 34 years to change, and they'd only gotten more comfortable with the dynamic. The only variable I had control over was myself. Over the next week, Marcus tried a softer approach. He called me from an unknown number, and I answered without thinking. "Hey," he said, his voice warm in a way it usually wasn't. "I've been thinking about when we were kids. Remember that summer we built the tree house in the backyard?" I remembered. I'd done most of the building while he'd handed me nails and taken credit when our parents came outside to look. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Those were good times," he continued. "I miss that. I miss us being close." There was a pause and I waited, because I knew where this was going. "Things are just tight right now with the wedding," he finally said. "I thought you'd understand. I mean, you're doing so well with your job and everything. It would really help if you could cover the venue deposit just this once. Just this once." Except it was never just once. It was a pattern that had been repeating my entire life, and I'd been too desperate for connection to see it. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I can't keep financing your life." "I'm not asking you to finance my life," he said, his tone shifting toward defensiveness. "I'm asking my sister for help. That's what family does." "You're right," I said. "That is what family does. But it has to go both ways." He was silent for a moment. Then, "I don't know what you want me to say, Vanessa. I'm sorry if you feel like—" "I don't need you to apologize for how I feel," I interrupted. "I need you to acknowledge what actually happened. But I don't think you can do that." "Jesus," he muttered. "You're really going to hold this over me? Fine. Don't help. See if I care." He hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand, feeling oddly calm. I'd just lost my brother, and I felt nothing but relief. That night, I started researching family estrangement. I found articles about scapegoat dynamics and golden child syndrome. I read forum posts from people who'd walked away from toxic families and never looked back. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and booked an initial consultation. For the first time in my life, I had language for what I'd experienced. It wasn't just favoritism or personality differences. It was a systemic pattern of emotional neglect and financial exploitation, and I'd been conditioned to accept it as normal. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't oversensitive, I was just finally seeing clearly. Have you ever realized that the people who demand the most from you are the ones who give the least? I was starting to see a pattern I'd ignored for 34 years, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. A week later, a formal wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Heavy cardstock, elegant calligraphy, a small envelope tucked inside with a handwritten note from my mother. "We're seating you with Amber's coworkers since you don't know many people. Also, bridesmaid dresses are $400. Let me know your size." I read the note 3 times, waiting for the hurt to arrive. Instead, I felt something close to amusement. I hadn't been asked to be a bridesmaid. I was being told to pay $400 for the privilege of being invisible at another family event. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I called Diane. "They want me to pay to be a bridesmaid," I said when she answered. "Are you serious?" "Completely." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to the wedding," I said. "But not as their daughter, as a witness." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done performing for them. I'm going to show up, be polite, and let them show everyone exactly who they are. I'm not financing anything. I'm not pretending everything's fine. I'm just going to be present and unavailable." "Van," Diane said carefully, "are you sure you want to put yourself through that?" "I need to," I said. "I need to see it one more time, clearly, so I never doubt this decision again." She sighed. "Okay, but I'm on standby. You call me if you need an exit strategy." "I will." I hung up and looked at the wedding invitation again. 6 months until the wedding. 6 months to prepare myself for what I knew would be the final test of my resolve. I wasn't going to fail this time. Over the next few months, the pressure from my family intensified in ways that would have broken me a year earlier. My mother called weekly with small favors that were anything but small. Could I cover the rehearsal dinner? The floral arrangements needed an upgrade. Could I help with that? The photographer they wanted was more expensive than expected. Surely I could contribute. Each time I said no, calmly, politely, without lengthy explanations. I'm not able to do that. The simplicity of the refusal seemed to baffle them. They were used to me explaining, justifying, apologizing. My silence was more unsettling than any argument could have been. Karen's tone shifted from requesting to demanding. Her voicemails grew sharper, more accusatory. I don't know what's happened to you, Vanessa, but you've become someone I don't recognize. Your brother deserves better than this. We all do. I saved every message, not because I planned to use them against her, but because I needed proof for myself. I needed evidence that I wasn't imagining this, that the cruelty was real and documented. My father took a different approach. He sent formal emails about duty and responsibility, about the Williams family legacy, about how disappointed he was in my behavior. Each email was structured like a business memo, clinical and cold. He never once asked how I was doing or why I'd started setting boundaries. He only cared that I'd stopped complying. Marcus tried manipulation wrapped in vulnerability. Late one night, he called and talked about feeling overwhelmed, about wanting me to be part of his life, about missing the relationship we used to have. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then he said it. If you could just help with the venue balance, it would mean everything. I know mom's been intense, but this is really important to me. I felt that familiar pang of sympathy, the old instinct to rescue him kicking in. Then I remembered the $12,000 bill, the unanswered loans, the decades of one-sided sacrifice. Marcus, I said gently, I think you and Amber are going to build something beautiful together, but I can't keep financing it. The line went dead. He'd hung up without saying goodbye. 3 weeks before the wedding, I received a group text from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I saw it was from Amber's mother, and the recipients included Karen, Amber, and several other family members. The message was a detailed breakdown of wedding expenses with suggested contributions from each family member. Most people were assigned amounts between $500 and $1,500. My assigned amount was $8,000. I stared at the number, my pulse steady, my mind clear. They'd looked at my income and decided I should subsidize everyone else's celebration. The disparity was staggering and intentional. I took a screenshot and saved it to my evidence folder. Then I muted the group chat and didn't respond. 2 days later, I noticed I'd been removed from the chat entirely. No explanation, just gone. The following week, I was uninvited from the bridal shower. Karen sent a brief text, her tone clinical. Given your current attitude, we think it's best if you take some space. We'll see you at the wedding. I read the message 3 times, waiting for the hurt. Instead, I felt something close to freedom. They'd made it easy for me. They'd drawn the line themselves. I responded with a single word, understood. Then I blocked the group chat and went back to work. 3 weeks before the wedding, my father called from an unknown number. I answered without thinking and immediately regretted it. Vanessa. His voice was hard, authoritative in the way it had been when I was a child, and he was correcting my behavior. We need to talk about your attitude. I didn't respond. I just listened. Your mother and I have been more than patient with you, he continued. But this behavior is unacceptable. You're embarrassing this family with your selfishness. We could have done many things differently when you were younger, but we chose to invest in your education and your future. And this is how you repay us? The threat was veiled but clear. The implication that they'd made sacrifices for me, that I owed them something, that my existence was a debt I could never fully repay. You have 1 week to apologize to your mother and contribute what you were asked, he said. Otherwise, don't bother coming to the wedding. I felt something snap into place, cold and final. I'll let you know, I said, and hung up. I sat in my apartment for a long time after that call, staring at nothing. Then I made a decision. I would attend the wedding, not as their daughter, not as a participant, but as a witness. I wouldn't cause a scene. I wouldn't confront anyone. I would simply be present, composed, and completely unavailable for their manipulation. I booked my own hotel room, separate from the family block. I arranged my own transportation. I bought a dress that made me feel confident and strong. I prepared myself mentally to be treated as an outsider. And I decided I was fine with that. They'd already cast me in that role. I was just accepting it. The night before the wedding, I wrote a letter I knew I'd never send. It was addressed to my parents, and in it, I named everything: the favoritism, the financial exploitation, the emotional neglect, the decades I'd spent trying to be enough for people who decided before I was born that I never would be. Writing it wasn't cathartic. It was clarifying. I wasn't looking for closure from them anymore. I was giving it to myself. The morning of the wedding, Diane called. "Last chance to back out," she said. "I can be there in 2 hours with wine and bad movies." "I need to do this," I said. "I need to see it one more time clearly, so I never doubt this decision." "Okay," she said, "but I'm on standby. You text me one word and I'm there." "I know, thank you." I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. Navy dress, simple jewelry, hair pulled back. I looked calm, professional, untouchable. I drove to the venue alone, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind quiet. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just ready for this to be over. The wedding venue was everything Marcus and Amber had wanted. Elegant, expensive, designed to impress. I arrived exactly on time. Not early enough to help with any last-minute crises. Not late enough to draw attention. I walked into the reception hall and approached the guest table, where a young woman with a clipboard smiled professionally. Name? Vanessa Williams. She scanned her list, found my name, and handed me a place card. Table 14. I looked at the seating chart displayed on an easel nearby. Table 14 was near the back exit, positioned behind a decorative column. The guests seated there were people I didn't recognize, Amber's coworkers from a previous job, according to the small printed cards on the table. I walked to my assigned seat and sat down without comment. From here, I could see the main tables, Marcus's college friends prominently displayed near the dance floor, Amber's extended family front and center, my parents seated at the head table like royalty overseeing their kingdom. I was physically present but symbolically erased. I'd expected this. It still stung. Cocktail hour began, and I watched my family move through the crowd. My mother was radiant, her dress elegant, her smile wide as she greeted guests and posed for photos. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. My father stood beside her, shaking hands and laughing with Amber's father, the two of them bonding over bourbon and business talk. I sat at my table with strangers who made polite small talk about the weather and the venue before lapsing into conversations about people I didn't know. I was a ghost in my own family's celebration. During a lull, I walked to the bar and ordered a glass of wine. As I waited, I overheard my mother talking to a nearby table of guests. "We're so proud of Marcus," she was saying, her voice warm with emotion. "He built his business from nothing, with such drive, such vision. He and Amber are the future of this family." I waited for her to mention me, to acknowledge my presence even in passing. She didn't. I took my wine and walked back to table 14, invisible. Amber approached my table briefly, her smile tight and professional. She was wearing her rehearsal dress, saving the wedding gown for the ceremony. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her tone suggesting she was anything but glad. "I know things have been complicated." The word complicated was designed to make me feel like the problem. like I was the source of tension in an otherwise perfect family dynamic. "It's a beautiful event," I said calmly. "Congratulations." She looked momentarily unsettled by my composure, like she'd expected defensiveness or emotion. When I offered neither, she smiled again and walked away. The ceremony began. I sat in my assigned seat and watched Marcus and Amber exchange vows about family, loyalty, and unconditional support. Marcus's voice cracked with emotion when he promised to always put Amber first, to build a life based on partnership and mutual respect. I wondered if he heard the irony in his own words. The ceremony concluded with applause and tears. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. My father beamed with pride. I sat in the back and felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger. Just a strange detachment, like I was watching a movie about someone else's family. The reception began with dinner service. Table 14 received their meals last, long after the head table and main guests had been served. The food was excellent. Filet mignon, roasted vegetables, some kind of elegant potato dish. But I barely tasted it. I was too focused on watching my family, studying the dynamics I'd been part of for 34 years, but had never fully understood until now. My mother approached my table during dessert, her expression tight with forced politeness. "I'm surprised you came," she said quietly, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. "Given how you've been acting, I hope you're planning to behave." I met her eyes and felt that cold clarity settle over me again. "I'm here to witness Marcus's wedding," I said. "That's all." The word witness was deliberate, not participate, not celebrate. Witness. My mother's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered and walked away. My father gave a toast during dinner, long and emotional, about Marcus's character and his worthiness of love. He talked about the sacrifices they'd made as parents, the pride they felt watching their son build a life, the joy of welcoming Amber into the family. He never mentioned me. Not once. I raised my glass with everyone else, my face neutral, my heart quiet. I was done reacting. I was done hoping for acknowledgement. I was just here, bearing witness to the final performance of a play I'd never had a real part in. Sitting at that table, invisible in a room full of my own relatives, I realized something crucial. The people who erase you will never acknowledge it. They'll just expect you to keep showing up. But what happens when you stop pretending it doesn't hurt? As dinner concluded and guests began moving toward the dance floor, I saw the venue coordinator approaching my table. She was carrying a leather billfolder, and my entire body went cold. Not again. She set it down in front of me with an apologetic expression that looked practiced, professional. "Ms. Williams," she said quietly, "there's an outstanding balance on the bar services and upgraded dinner selections. Your mother indicated you'd be covering it?" I opened the folder with hands that had gone numb. The invoice was itemized: premium bar package, upgraded wine selection, additional hors d'oeuvres, enhanced dessert service. At the bottom, 6,700 $6,700. On top of the $12,000 I'd already paid for the engagement party. On top of the decades of gifts and loans and contributions that had never been acknowledged or repaid. I looked across the room at my parents. They were laughing with guests, champagne flutes in hand, completely at ease. They knew. They'd planned this. They'd seated me at the back of the room, excluded me from every meaningful moment, and now they were handing me another bill, as if it was my natural role in this family. The person who paid for things while being treated like she didn't exist. I stood up, my decision instant and absolute. I picked up the bill folder and walked calmly toward the head table. Guests nearby noticed my approach, their conversations pausing mid-sentence. My mother looked up, her expression shifting from satisfaction to irritation as she realized what I was carrying. I set the folder down in front of her, my voice quiet but clear. "I'm not paying this." The head table went silent. Amber's parents stared. Marcus looked mortified. My mother's face flushed with anger. "Vanessa," She hissed. Not here. We'll discuss this later. No, I said, my tone still calm but unyielding. We'll discuss it now. You've asked me to finance two of Marcus's events without warning, without gratitude, and without any acknowledgement of the $47,000 I've spent trying to be part of this family over the last decade. I'm done. The words hung in the air. Several nearby tables had gone quiet, guests turning to watch. My father stood, his voice low and threatening. You're making a scene. I'm stating a fact, I said, my voice steady. I've been financially supporting this family for years while being treated like I don't exist. You seated me with strangers at my own brother's wedding. You handed me a bill at his engagement party without asking. And now you're doing it again. I'm not the problem here. I'm just the only one who stopped pretending this is normal. My mother's voice shook with rage. How dare you! After everything we've done for you! I interrupted, my calm finally cracking into something sharper. What have you done for me, Mom? Specifically. Because I have receipts for everything I've done for you. The question hung there, witnessed by 24 guests. My mother didn't answer. She couldn't. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and damning. My father tried to redirect. This is your brother's wedding day, Vanessa. If you can't be supportive, I paid for his engagement party, I said, my voice quiet but devastating. $12,000. Without being asked, without being thanked. And I was uninvited from the bridal shower for refusing to do it again. I'm here because I was told I had to be. But I'm not financing this anymore. Marcus stood, flustered, trying to salvage the moment. Van, we didn't mean for it to be like this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not as my brother, but as someone who'd benefited from my erasure his entire life and never once questioned it. Yes, you did, I said softly. You all did. I turned and walked out of the reception hall without looking back. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors or make dramatic gestures. I just left, my head high, my decision absolute. Behind me, I heard the murmur of shocked conversation rising. But I didn't care. I was done performing for them. I was done pretending their treatment of me was acceptable. I'd told the truth in front of witnesses, and whatever happened next was their problem, not mine. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I hadn't planned that confrontation, but I didn't regret it. For the first time in 34 years, I'd named reality, and I'd walked away. I started the engine and drove back to my hotel, my phone already vibrating with incoming calls and texts. I silenced it without looking. I'd read them later. Or maybe I wouldn't. Right now, I just needed to breathe. I sat in my hotel room and finally looked at my phone. 63 notifications. Texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly weighing in with opinions and demands for explanation. The family dynamics were predictable. Some defended my parents. Some asked what really happened. And a few stayed conspicuously silent. Marcus had sent 3 messages. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I don't know what I did to deserve this. Don't contact me again. My mother's text was brief and final. You are no longer welcome in this family. Don't contact us again. My father had sent an email with the subject line, unforgivable. I didn't open it. But there were other messages too. Unexpected ones. Aunt Linda. I heard what happened. I'm proud of you. A second cousin I barely knew. I've always wondered why they treated you that way. Tonight made sense of a lot. And then from a number I didn't recognize. This is Emily, Amber's sister. Can we talk? I stared at that last message for a long time before responding. Sure. Call me, she called within minutes. I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I was at the head table when you confronted your mom. I've been sick about it all night. You don't need to apologize, I said, my voice tired. You didn't do anything. That's the problem, Emily said. None of us did anything. We all saw how they treated you. at the engagement party tonight, all of it. Amber's family has been talking about it for months. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't want to cause tension. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange mixture of validation and grief. It's not your responsibility to fix my family. Maybe not, Emily said, but I want you to know you weren't imagining it. Everyone saw it. And what you said tonight, you weren't wrong. We talked for another 20 minutes. Emily shared that Amber had confided in her about Marcus's financial problems, about the pressure his parents were putting on everyone, about the loans Marcus had taken from relatives and never repaid. She said Amber's family had been quietly concerned about the marriage, about whether Marcus was capable of building a stable life when his parents were still funding everything. They're not good people, Emily said finally. Your parents, I mean. I'm sorry, I know that's harsh. It's honest, I said, and I appreciate it. After we hung up, I lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. My phone kept buzzing with incoming messages, but I ignored them. The validation from Emily mattered, but it didn't change anything. I'd still lost my family tonight. I'd still walked away from the only belonging I'd ever known, dysfunctional as it was. But I'd also told the truth, and I'd done it with witnesses. Diane called at midnight. I saw your location moving, she said. You left the wedding. Are you okay? I confronted them, I said, in front of everyone. I told them I wasn't paying another bill, and I named everything. The favoritism, the exploitation, all of it. Oh my God, Van. They kicked me out of the family, I said. And then, surprisingly, I laughed. Officially, my mom sent a text. How do you feel? I thought about it. Free, I said finally. Sad, but free. Good, Diane said firmly. You should feel free. They were using you, Van, for years, and you finally stood up for yourself. We talked until 2 in the morning. When I finally hung up and turned off the lights, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just a quiet, settling peace, like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I slept better that night than I had in months. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "You're not the only one." I opened it hesitantly, expecting another accusation or guilt trip from a distant relative. Instead, it was from someone named David, who identified himself as my father's cousin. I vaguely remembered meeting him once at a family reunion years ago. Vanessa, I heard about what happened at the wedding. I want you to know you're not the first person Robert and Karen have done this to. 20 years ago, they asked me for a loan to help with Marcus's medical bills when he was a kid. I gave them $15,000. When I asked about repayment a year later, they accused me of being heartless and money-obsessed. They cut me off completely and told the family I was harassing them. I stopped going to family events after that. I'm sorry you had to learn the same lesson I did. They're not capable of accountability. But you're not crazy, and you're not alone. David. I read the email 3 times, feeling that same validation I'd felt talking to Emily. I wasn't the first victim of my parents' financial manipulation. I was just the latest. Aunt Linda called that afternoon. I've been thinking about you, she said, about what happened, and I want to tell you something I should have told you years ago. Okay, I said carefully. Your grandmother, your dad's mother, she saw how they treated you. Before she died, she wanted to leave you a separate inheritance, something just for you. But Robert convinced her it wasn't necessary because you were doing fine on your own. Marcus got the bulk of the inheritance, almost $70,000. He used it as seed money for that business venture that failed within a year. I felt my breath catch. I didn't know that. Robert made sure you didn't, Linda said. He's been controlling the narrative your whole life, Van, making sure you never had allies, never had resources, never had anyone to validate what you were experiencing. That's not parenting. That's abuse. We talked for over an hour. Linda shared more family history, how my grandfather had been emotionally abusive, how he'd played favorites among his children, how Robert had been the golden child and had apparently learned all the wrong lessons from that dynamic. She believed Robert was unconsciously repeating the pattern with Marcus and me, perpetuating a cycle of favoritism and neglect that went back generations. "It doesn't excuse what he's done to you," Linda said, "but it might help you understand that this was never about you. You were cast in this role before you were born. There's nothing you could have done differently." After we hung up, I sat with that information for a long time. The psychological explanation didn't make the pain less real, but it did make it less personal. My parents weren't capable of the relationship I'd been seeking, not because I was unworthy, but because they were emotionally stunted, locked in a generational pattern they refused to acknowledge or heal. I wasn't going to wait for them to change. I was going to build a life where their presence was irrelevant. That decision felt like freedom. 6 weeks after the wedding, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. I signed for it with a sense of dread, and my instinct was correct. The letter was from a law firm representing Robert and Karen Williams. It accused me of defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and disruption of a private family event. It demanded a formal written apology and threatened legal action if I continued to spread false narratives about the Williams family. I read it twice, then laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. They were threatening to sue me for telling the truth. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she specialized in family law and civil disputes. I brought her all my documentation, receipts, text messages, voicemails, emails, the itemized list of $47,000 in contributions. She reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing more incredulous as she read. "They have no case," she said finally. "This is intimidation, not litigation. Everything you said at the wedding was factually accurate and documented. But I'd recommend we respond formally, just to establish a record." Patricia drafted a response letter that was calm, factual, and devastating. It denied all claims and included an itemized list of my financial contributions to family events, along with dates, amounts, and context. The letter stated clearly that I had made no false statements, and that any legal action would be met with a countersuit for harassment and frivolous litigation. We sent the letter via certified mail. I never heard from their attorney again. But my mother left a voicemail 2 days later, her voice shaking with rage. "You've destroyed this family, Vanessa. I hope you're proud of yourself. You've turned everyone against us with your lies. You're a selfish, ungrateful—" I deleted the message before she could finish. I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew exactly what she thought of me, and her opinion no longer mattered. What did matter was the realization settling over me like a final truth. I was being blamed for refusing to enable dysfunction. In my family's narrative, boundaries were betrayal, health was hostility, self-preservation was selfishness. I would never be anything but the villain in their story, no matter what I did or didn't do. But I didn't have to accept their story as truth. I started therapy the following week. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, specialized in family trauma and complex PTSD. In our first session, she asked me to describe my family dynamic. I told her everything: the favoritism, the financial exploitation, the decades of emotional neglect. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked a question that shifted my entire perspective. "What would your life look like if you stopped trying to prove you're worthy of love and just lived as if you already are?" I stared at her, feeling something crack open inside me. "I don't know," I said finally. "I've never tried that." "Maybe it's time," she said gently. Over the next several months, I worked through beliefs I'd carried my entire life: that I had to earn love, that my worth was conditional, that conflict meant failure. I learned that walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment. It was self-protection. I learned that I was allowed to prioritize my own peace, even if that peace came at the cost of relationships that had never truly served me. I learned that I was enough, exactly as I was, regardless of whether my family ever saw it. 6 months after the wedding, I ran into a former family friend at a coffee shop in Chicago. Her name was Margaret, And she'd been close with my mother years ago before some unspoken falling out had ended their friendship. "Vanessa," she said, surprised. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look different." "I feel different," I said honestly. We talked for a few minutes, the conversation polite but surface level. Then, as she was leaving, she paused. "I heard about what happened at Marcus's wedding," she said quietly. "Your mother called me afterward. She was very upset." I waited, bracing myself for judgment. "I just want you to know," Margaret continued, "I believe you. I stopped being friends with your mother 15 years ago because she asked me to lie to my husband about a loan she'd taken from our joint account. When I refused, she told everyone I'd betrayed her confidence. I lost several friendships over it." She touched my arm briefly. "You're not the first person she's done this to, and you won't be the last. But you were brave to walk away." After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, staring at my cooling latte. The validation kept coming from unexpected places. People who'd witnessed my family's behavior, people who'd experienced it themselves, people who'd stayed silent for years but were finally willing to speak. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't oversensitive. I was just finally seeing clearly. That night, I hosted a dinner party at my apartment. Diane came, along with 3 other close friends from work. We cooked together, laughed over wine, shared stories about our lives. No one asked about my family. No one pressured me to reconcile or forgive. They just accepted me as I was and offered the same in return. This, I realized, was what family was supposed to feel like: reciprocal, safe, genuine. I'd been looking for it in the wrong place my entire life. 1 year after the wedding, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. The return address was my parents' home. I stared at the envelope for a long time. My heart rate elevated before deciding to open it. The letter was from my mother, written in her neat, formal handwriting. The tone was not apologetic. It was conditional. "Vanessa, enough time has passed. Family is family, and it's time we moved forward. Your father and I are willing to put this behind us if you're ready to do the same. Marcus and Amber are expecting a baby in the spring, and it would be good for everyone if you could be part of the child's life. We're planning a family dinner next month to discuss reconciliation. Let us know if you'll attend. Mom." I read the letter 3 times, looking for any acknowledgement of wrongdoing, any apology, any accountability. There was none, just an expectation that I would return to my old role now that they needed me again, this time as an aunt who could be useful, who could babysit or contribute financially to yet another family milestone. I sat with the letter for 3 days. I drafted responses, deleted them, drafted again. Finally, I settled on something simple, clear, and final. "Mom, thank you for reaching out. I've spent the past year building a life rooted in honesty, respect, and reciprocity, values I wasn't able to access within our family dynamic. I'm not interested in reconciliation without accountability, and I don't believe that's something you're prepared to offer. I wish you well, but I won't be participating in future family events or relationships. Please respect this boundary moving forward. Vanessa." I mailed the letter and felt a profound sense of completion. I wasn't slamming a door in anger. I was closing it with intention. This was my choice, made from clarity, not pain. A week later, Marcus called from a new number. I answered, curious. "Hey," he said, his voice tired. "I know you got Mom's letter. I wanted to talk to see if we could work this out." "Okay," I said carefully. He stumbled through a vague apology that was more about his discomfort than my hurt. He mentioned the baby, the hope that I'd come around and be part of their lives. He never once acknowledged the $12,000 bill, the years of financial exploitation, the public humiliation at his wedding. When he finished, I took a breath. "Marcus, I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't trust you, and I don't want to be in your life. That's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. I hope you and Amber build something healthy, but I won't be part of it." I hung up before he could respond. He didn't call again. 2 years after the wedding, I was promoted to director at my firm. I moved to a larger apartment with a balcony garden overlooking the Chicago skyline. I traveled to Portugal, then Iceland, then Japan, places I'd always wanted to see but had delayed, waiting for the right time or the right company. I went alone and found it profoundly restorative. My friendships deepened. Diane became family in the truest sense, someone who showed up, who listened, who celebrated my wins and supported me through losses. I hosted regular dinners, attended book clubs, joined a hiking group. I built a community rooted in mutual respect and genuine affection. I dated casually, nothing serious, but enjoyed the process of getting to know people without the weight of family trauma coloring every interaction. I learned what healthy relationships looked like, how they felt, what they required. I wrote in a journal about forgiveness, not for my family, but for myself. I forgave myself for trying so hard, for staying so long, for believing I could change people who had no interest in changing. I forgave myself for the years I'd spent thinking I was the problem. In therapy, Dr. Okonkwo asked me one day if I'd thought about my family recently. Not much, I said honestly. Not with anger, not with longing, just with understanding, I guess. They're who they are, and I'm who I am, and those two things aren't compatible. How does that feel? She asked. Peaceful, I said. Sad sometimes, but mostly peaceful. She smiled. That's growth, Vanessa. Real growth. I didn't check my phone hoping for an apology anymore. I didn't rehearse imaginary confrontations. I didn't wonder what I could have done differently. The relationship was over, and I was at peace with it. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't their suffering or their realization of what they'd lost. The real revenge was my peace. It was my thriving without them. It was the life I'd built on my own terms, free from their demands, their dismissals, their distortions. It's been 2 years since I walked out of that wedding. I don't think about them much anymore. Not with anger, not with longing, just with the quiet understanding that some people can't love you the way you need, and that's not your failure to fix. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over family, I hope you'll share it, engage with it, and maybe hit that subscribe button because these stories matter. You matter, and your peace is worth protecting. Last month, I sat on my balcony at sunset, coffee in hand, a book in my lap. My phone was on silent. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't hoping for anything. I was just there, whole, at peace, finally belonging to myself. I used to think family was something you were born into. Now I know it's something you choose. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself.